Welcome, everybody. This is Netta Pitt. I'm the host of the CISO's Current, a CISO's Connect podcast. Today, I have a special guest. We're going to, obviously, in this podcast, we explore the interaction and intersection of leadership, resiliency, cybersecurity strategy, and what that means for today's evolving digital world and how CISOs have to address that. So today we're going to dive into the state of the CISO's role, how it's shifting, about those challenges I just spoke of, and then how is leadership changing to meet those from a CISO's role to meet those challenges, and how are we driving the growth of knowledge about cyber risk to the board and really communicating that. So I'm joined with Andrew Wilder, the CISO, from Vector. I'll just give you a quick little blurb about Andrew, and then I will let him pontificate on anything else that he would like to add. So Andrew Wilder, Chief Information Security Officer at Vector, where he's led companies' global cybersecurity strategy across its technology and operational platforms, with over 2 decades of experience in enterprise risk, threat intelligence, and security transformation. Andrew is a widely respected and collaborative and forward-thinking leader. His approach emphasizes aligning security with business objectives, fostering cross-functional partnership, and enabling innovation through trust and resiliency. Prior to Vector, Andrew held other key security leadership roles at top-tier technology and financial service firms. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew. Anything that I missed or want to add?
Netta, I don't know where you got that or how you and ChatGPT came up with that, but I am humbled and honored by your introduction to me. I have nothing else to add. It's really a pleasure to be here to talk to you about leadership, resiliency, cyber strategy, helping to present cyber risk to the board. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing what, you dig a little bit, and I was a little bit of a stalker trying to figure out, exactly all the great things that you've done, but, makes me feel a little creepy, but, we'll go from there. So, all right, let's jump in. And, really what I want to kind of talk to you about is, as the position changes, right? From, where we used to be the gatekeepers and we used to be the last to the table to know about initiatives and inevitably to help manage risk and security at organizations, we became the organization of no, right? Because we were brought in proverbially at the last minute before things would go awry. So now I think that's changing. I don't know if you've seen that change in your organization, but now I think more CISOs are being seen and need to be seen and really need to drive and enable growth within the business, right? They need to be the differentiator within the organization that makes their organization's security better than anybody else's and at a different pace, and allow the business to run at a different pace. So can you talk to me about how that's changed over your trajectory in your career, how it's changed at Vector, if it has, and where do you see it heading?
Yep. Great question. And I have like 6 different answers to it. So I'm gonna try and get through all of those things. So the first part of the question is, cybersecurity exists because the business exists. We wouldn't be here without the business. And so as you said, we need to be enablers of the business, enablers of growth. There's a great analogy that a friend of mine uses about Formula One race cars. And he said, look at a business like a Formula One race car. The cybersecurity team can be your brakes, not the department of no, but you can't go fast in a Formula One car if you don't have brakes, right? You need someone to put the brakes on from time to time. So I'm not sure I love that analogy because it lends itself well to the organization of no, but it's really about enabling growth, but enabling growth in a secure way. And you asked about kind of the trajectory change of this over time. And there's kind of two key years that I remember in my career history where I think cybersecurity changed. The first year is right around 2012. What happened then is in 2012, breaches started to become commonplace in the news. We started hearing about cybersecurity breaches, whereas before it was very uncommon. You might have heard like Stuxnet or something like that, but it's really rare. Now you're starting to see healthcare companies, Target, banks, companies that we all know that are getting these cyber breaches. So that was when it went more from a back office to a boardroom discussion, right? So that was one kind of change. And the other one was around 2018, and at least that's where it was for me in my career. And we started seeing things like DevSecOps. You mentioned something like being brought in at the last minute to say no. When I was at Nestle, Nestle had an objective one year to try to move at least 10% of their business to e-commerce. And so what did that mean? That meant all of the marketing teams and the sales teams started building these big e-commerce platforms. And how would that work with security? Well, someone would say, the CFO of a business unit would say, well, you got to go get sign off from Andrew and his team before you go live with this thing. So they'd come they're like, we're going to go live tomorrow. We need you to sign off. And I'd say, there's absolutely no way that I could ever sign off on this. There's all kinds of security holes in it. I'm sorry, I can't do it. If the CFO wants to sign off, he can. And they would always say no too. So, but what we started to say was, look, how do we make sure this doesn't happen the next time? So we started to introduce the concept of DevSecOps, where basically the security team becomes embedded into the development team, and we help them. And every week we're scanning their code in test. And so by the time they're ready to go live, they don't even need to ask me anything. We've already validated everything. They're good to go. There was another phrase that you used that I really liked, which was a seat at the table. Um, and you're right. The CISO job, the cybersecurity executive leadership job, is changing. It needs to be a business executive that understands financials, that understands the objectives of the business. The only way to be able to bring cyber risk to the board is not to come with a bunch of tech talk and MTTD and EDRs and all of those little things that we all love, but is to really talk about what matters to the business most. What are we doing to protect those things? Where are we the most risky? What things can we do to address those risks? That's speaking the language of the business. So to me, it's evolving into more of an enterprise risk leader than it really is a information security person. And at this point, the term information security is kind of dated itself. It's more like a cybersecurity business risk expert or something. I don't know. Anyway, that's my like 6 answers to your question.
No, those are great 6 answers, and I agree. I mean, I've heard that analogy before, that it's like a Formula One race car, and if you don't have brakes, you're not going to get very far, and if you have brakes that are always engaged, you're not going to get very far. It's a happy balance, right? And so you've got to try to go as fast as you can into that curve without over correcting on the brakes or under correcting on the brakes. And I think that you're spot on. That's exactly what our job is, right? And it becomes a delicate balance. I think we are one of those individuals and in the business that actually have to know everything about the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because inevitably security spans across all of it, whether it's finance or HR or marketing, or I never thought I would have to know about marketing, right? And but I do, and you have to understand from a business point of view what they're trying to, what their goal is, and how you can enable that. So I thank you. That was an awesome response. Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Okay, so taking that and thinking about the change and those changes that happened, and I agree, 2012, 2018, those were monumental kind of changes, right? It was the first time we really got to hear about what a breach was, and now it's commonplace, which doesn't mean that it's not important. It just means that the bad guys have gotten better, right? And they have to only be right once, and we have to be right. They have to be right once, and we have to be right 100% of the time, right? So it's hard, right?
Yeah.
When we're talking about governance and agility, right? Because we need to enable the business to run fast. CISO need to be able to do that. They need to engage their teams, and they need to drive that leadership to drive that across the enterprise, right? So that we are at the hand in glove with the developers, hand in glove with the business, trying to meet their goals. So how do you think we can do both? Because I think it's a tightrope that we walk between governance and agility, right? And inevitably, as in risk that we all speak with, to the board and everything, there's always a give and take. And so talk to me about how you've seen that kind of morph, or where you see there's challenges in that, especially now that some of the major players, CCPA, GDPR, uh, all of those acronyms that are out there are kind of ramping up what it means, and what those governance qualities need to be for a secure organization. Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yes. So you said it's a tightrope act, and you're absolutely right. One of the slides that I use when I teach my course at the university is somebody else made it. It's called The Responsibilities of a CISO. And the font is so tiny on that slide that there's no way you could possibly read it. It's one of those mind maps, it's got stuff going everywhere. And I show that to people to remind them that, if everything is a priority, nothing's a priority. What you need to do, what your job to do for your company and for your team is to focus. And I think it's different for different people in different industries, right? So if you're a cyber leader in the financial industry or in the healthcare industry, you have some very strong regulations that are going to run your life. I have a lot of friends in the banking industry, and they're just being audited constantly. Now, there is some level of security in regulations, in certifications, in governance, things like that. So it does kind of bring everyone up to a level playing field, which I think is good overall for the industry, but it's not doing true cybersecurity. So, a lot of people will say compliance is not security, security is not compliance. So you still need to find a way to do real security while at the same time satisfying those things. And I think there's a couple ways, you asked how we can do both. I think there's some ways where you can get solutions that will help you to satisfy the requirements of your auditor or your reg, but at the same time do real security for you. There's a quote that I used last week at Gartner that everybody ate up, which is hackers don't care about your SOC 2 certification. So you can be as compliant as you want, but as you said, they only need to be right one time. I think from the team perspective, what you really need to do is provide a safe space for your team to do their best. So you're going to be, as a leader, you're going to be bombarded all the time with, oh, we need to get this certification, or, oh, we need to comply with this, whatever. And you need to say, look, my team is focused on doing these three things specifically. That's what they're going to do. Once we get to a mature state in those things, then we'll look at the next task that we're going to do. But on the other hand, I think there are some times, we talked earlier about being a business executive. There are times when some of those things can have a real benefit to the business. If you're in a financial business and you don't have that certification and you need to achieve it, that can help you do business. It can help you get better customers, things like that. So there are some things where it can help. And so if it's helping, I see the advantage of it as well. The last thing you asked about was CCPA and GDPR and all the other flavors of those things. One of the things that I love those for are for calculating quantitative risk. Because if you look at the number of records you have and you're a European business or you're a US-based business, and you have customers in California, you can say, look, based on those regulations, this is how much a record breach would cost us in terms of fines. And then you can say, here's a couple of different things that we can do to help to lower those risks. And it's really a financial calculation versus just reds and orange and yellows on a heat map kind of thing. So it helps you in those type of calculations. But again, all of these things are helping to kind of raise the bar. But there are times when your team's focus goes off of doing real security and goes into satisfying audit requirements. And that's not, I don't think that's why any of those things were created. I think the idea was to create mature cybersecurity organizations, but unfortunately, it's about passing audits sometimes. So,
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I think sometimes, and I think this is changing in the industry. I think businesses, organizations have been somewhat it's checkbox, right? Governance is a checkbox, and if I again, like you're saying, if I have ISO 27001 and I pass that audit or any of the other audits, then I'm secure. No,
yeah.
you're audit ready, right? That's what you are. So, but and I think that the point is really uh, critical in the fact that what you were saying is a CISO really needs to provide focus for their team, provide focus for their team, and provide that message to the organization. These are the four things that we're going to focus on. We're going to get really good at these, and then we're going to find the next three things to focus on. Because if that's communicated up and out, then the team has the ability to focus, and the team then has
Yep.
a vision and a mission, right? And it's always about mission, right? What's the mission, and are we all following the same mission? So I think that that's super critical. Yes, I do think that governance has the ability to raise all ships, right? But I don't know that all ships need to be raised at the same pace, right? And
Yep.
and so again, to the point, when you're talking about industries that you're in and specific industries, it all has to be curtailed and fine tuned to those specific industries to really match that. So,
Great.
spot on, spot on. All right. Last, maybe, unless there's other conversations that you would like to have, but you know, for the longest time, probably pre-COVID, I will say, it's always been perimeter-based security, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a tremendous change to perimeter-based security, right?
Yep.
We're cloud-based, we're SaaS-based, we're everybody's working from everywhere. Even if we have an influx of people moving back into the office, they're still doing work everywhere. So, one of the things that from my, tenure in being a CISO, is the thing that always I try to stress is if I have visibility,
Mm-hmm.
then I can understand what's going on, right? And
Yep.
I need visibility to be able to understand what the timeline and the story is of what an event that's happening, right? Because I'm not gonna stop everything before it happens, right? That those days are over, right? You have to have that story, you have to have that timeline, you have to have that visibility to really be able to react smartly and do instead of a broad kind of hammer kill chain, right? What's the smart kill chain? Talk to me about how you've seen that change, how you think that that's changing in the organization, but how do you think it's also because our landscape is exploding, right? When you get AI, you get SaaS, you get IoT, nanotechnologies coming, quickly, right? All of that's coming. So, how talk to me about how you see that's going to change and how you see, or if you see that visibility and that ability to have a smart response is important to uh, helping manage through events.
So first of all, I am going to provide focus on my answer. If you want to talk about how AI is going to disrupt cybersecurity and the rest of the business world, we'll have a different episode on that.
Awesome.
But I'm happy to answer all of the other questions that were in that very loaded list of stuff. So first of all, I don't think this is going to be news to anybody, but the perimeter is gone. There's no perimeter anymore. Now, there may be perimeters around crown jewels that are in, private data centers. That perimeter still exists, but the focus of cybersecurity, which used to be heavily on perimeter, is kind of going away. There is an expectation from our business to be able to work from everywhere, whenever they want, on whatever devices they want. There's some challenges around that as well. Another quote that I like is that there's companies that think they haven't been breached and the other companies that know they have, but that's it. There's nobody else in there. You talked a little bit about the models. I think there's really three models you can look at. There's a zero trust model where everything has to authenticate and say that it is what it is all the time. There's the cyber kill chain model that's based on the Lockheed Martin model, where we're looking all along the kill chain. So we start to look at those kind of different indicators. And that's really a mature model where you have threat intel and you have hunters and you have all that kind of stuff. But that's real cybersecurity, by the way. The other model that I think works really well for kind of a small and medium-sized business who just wants to get into cybersecurity is the resilience model, right? Like, how can you continue to operate while you're under attack? How much kind of redundancy do you have? Can you build apps that will catch up later if something is offline? That sort of thing. Cybersecurity is the only business function where our risks are constantly changing. Now, you could argue that in finance, there are risks that are changing, there's geopolitical risks that are changing, but ours are changing like very, very rapidly. Um, my favorite thing that you talked about in that list of questions was the thing about visibility. A lot of people ask cybersecurity leaders, what keeps you up at night? And my answer is always the risks that I don't know about. The risks that I do know about, I'm able to prioritize those and have our team working on those to figure out, how to address those largest risks. But the things that I don't know about, I can't effectively prioritize those. So it's really getting that visibility across the entire landscape and including SaaS and AI and on-prem and data center and in the cloud and everything to be able to say, when attacks happen, where do I cut them off? Where do I see it happening? And then how do I know for the next time how to prevent those things? Because my own threat intel is always my most valuable threat intel. There was a statistic that someone gave that said, I'm not 100% sure that it's correct, but it's interesting to think about. 90% of cyber attacks follow the same telemetry that was used in a previous attack on that same company. So people aren't spending enough time focusing on doing really good after action reviews, doing good incident response kind of follow-ups, closing those holes. They're getting too focused on going back to the audit or the governance like we talked about before. And the real cybersecurity is doing really good follow-up of those big incidents to make sure that they don't happen again, or at least they don't happen again following those same lines that they did previously. And again, happy to talk about AI and how it's disrupting cyber, but I don't think we have enough time for that today, Nana.
That's a whole another left turn and a whole different discussion in itself. But I love the fact that, because I think one of the things that always happens, or not always, but has a tendency to happen in after action, right, is
Mhm.
everybody just goes back to, now we're going back to keeping the business moving forward, right?
Don't do
We've
that.
got to
Don't do
we've
that.
got to fix everything that we've lost. We've got to drive goals stronger, harder, right? And that after action, where we are focused on closing those known gaps and holes, I think
Mhm.
that is one of the areas that that's the part that keeps me up at night, is when we have an event and I'm like, did all of these other things get closed off?
Yeah.
Because to the point, if it's going to work, right, the next person's going to use it, right, and they're going to try that because it worked one time. So
Yep.
they're not going to reinvent the wheel if they don't have to, because again, we're all humans, right, and we're going to take the path of least resistance to get into something, right?
That's right.
So I think that that's spot on. And I think one of the areas that is hard to get everybody to focus on after an event is closing those gaps. And I think it's important that we think about that.
Yep.
So thank you for bringing that up. Anything else that you want to chat about? Because I think this is a really good breadth of information about kind of how the CISO's role is changing, all of the things that we have to think about, and really the thought of, how we're driving through leadership and that thought leadership to make our organizations better, but not just security, but the organization as a whole. Anything else you want to add in parting?
So if you'd allow me, I'd like to make a plug.
Sure.
I am on the board. In fact, I was recently elected as president of the board of a cyber nonprofit called CyberUp. We take mid-career people, give them free cybersecurity training and certification, place them as apprentices in businesses around the country. It's a great organization. They go do K through 12, and then so that's inspiring the next. Really great. Happy to chat about that. Anybody that's interested, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But it's a really wonderful organization, and I just wanted to give them a quick plug, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. And any way that I can help, please feel free, because that's near and dear to my heart. I think we need more people in early in career, early in the K through 12, thinking about cybersecurity. I can't get my own son. He's like, no, I don't want to do that, what you do, because that seems boring. And I'm like, it's really not boring. But
We would love to have you come do a mentoring evening for one of our learning cohorts and just talk to the class about your experience and answer some questions. It would be wonderful.
absolutely. Anytime, any way I can help, please feel free, reach out. We'll get connected and we'll do that. But Andrew, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. And hopefully we'll have you back on and we'll talk about AI or some other new crazy thing that's going to come out in probably the next 6 months that we're all going to try to figure out how to wrap our heads around. So I really appreciate it. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. No, that was a pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the CISOs Connect Current, a CISOs Connect podcast. I look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you.